start recording. Today's lecture, the final lecture, is all about the prototypes. And then after we do the presentations, we'll do a little bit of a shallow dive into server-side code and how server-side code can really be that next level implementation upon what you've built so far. And then I'd also like to open things up to any random questions that you might have as you're getting interested, if you're getting interested in getting into the digital health IT world. I know that I've already gotten a few questions on the side from you all related to that. And so I'd be happy to answer some of those questions as a group forum in case they're interesting to others. And then also happy to talk to any of you afterwards who might have questions about how you might pursue a career in digital health. Without further ado, let's get started. So just as a final refresher on the final project, with the code, what I'm really looking for, and I'll give you till tomorrow to submit that code over to me. If you could just send me an email with the link, whether that be GitHub or some other location where you've got your code. I will need that in order to give the final grades. Looking for content, would a new user be able to understand the purpose of this prototype without guidance? So are you explaining everything well? Design, are you using some of the design principles that we went over back in lecture 2? One thing that I've emphasized over and over is, can you take inputs from the user and then transform that into something cool using JavaScript? Ideally, something cool that also satisfies the user story. And then are you using any data visuals? And then one thing with the code, and this might be something that you need to dive into before you submit tomorrow, but I'd like to see that the code is really clearly commented and maintainable. So it doesn't have a bunch of messy code that doesn't do anything. Maybe it was copied over from some other project. So make sure you clean that up a little bit. But in terms of presentations, really looking for about a 15 to 20 minute presentation, and then we'll have Q&A at the end as we did with the wireframes. I'd like you to really focus on the user story. So did the team describe, and this is a question I'm asking myself as I grade, the user story in detail, and then also explain how their prototype satisfies the user's needs? So that's really the question that I'd like you to have in your head as you're doing the presentation. Roles, do you explain what you did and why, and did you split those roles up evenly? And then methodology, did you follow the Agile methodology? I'll be looking back at those, the Agile or the group project management templates and just making sure that you all did that. And then user testing, did you explain how you used user testing? And this is really key. I want to know how you used your experience during the user testing to improve your prototype. Okay, so this is the order that I've got. If Drone Pharmacy team is okay with it, I know Justin and Alana requested to go first. What do y'all think?
Yeah, they can go first.
Okay, sounds good. So we'll start off with dispatch. I will stop sharing my screen, and then as soon as you all start sharing, then you can get started.
Perfect. Thank you, Drones. Here is our presentation. So I'll be doing the majority of the presentation, and Alana will be doing a majority of the walkthrough. We're ready when you are.
I'm ready.
Perfect. So we're going to be able to kind of go over our app idea of dispatch, and we'll go over some of the features and how it kind of accomplishes the user story. So going over and understanding the patient point of view. As a patient, I want the ability to be able to travel to medical sites and medical appointments at a low cost where I can be able to gain the best possible access to healthcare while traveling safely. Dispatch accomplishes these kind of needs in 3 different ways. The ability to travel to medical needs. Dispatch will allow individuals to be able to choose the medical site or physician to be able to travel to and connect them specifically with drivers in that specific area. They will users also want a low cost transportation. Dispatch is something that will be covered by insurance companies and other hospitals, so that individuals will not have to be able to go pay a dime. They also need for safe transportation. dispatch screens and make sure that all drivers are the most qualified. So how Alana and I were able to work together to be able to make this app into fruition. I was more on the backend developer, so I was more responsible for JavaScript, for inputting some of the JavaScript maps and the other features that we were able to go show that Alana will showcase later. I was also in charge of more of the user testing, so I conducted and took notes during user testing meetings, and also created the introduction to be able to reach out to certain individuals. I was also able to communicate these needs specifically with Alana to be able to make sure that they're implemented within the application. Alana was focused more on the front-end design, working with HTML and CSS to design an easy-to-use layout for patients in order to be able to navigate this application. She was also the Scrum Master and was able to divvy up work accordingly so that each team member was able to contribute equally. She was also in charge of quality assurance to be able to make sure that these features that we were able to implement were tested appropriately and to their highest quality. So going over some of the methodology per week about how we actually went about this, the first week we more focused on an introduction. So Alana and I were able to meet and discuss further about the plan that she kind of wanted to be able to have with dispatch and ways to be able to move forward, as well as we used the code that was developed in class as a jumping off point. Week 2, we created a rough draft of the home screen, which was great to be able to understand what are some of the features that we want to be able to have and where can we be able to use JavaScript and CSS to start customizing those. Week 3, we actually applied those different learnings in JavaScript and CSS to be able to create this personalized application. And week 4, we mostly focused on incorporating the user feedback. Some of the challenges that we were able to face during this specific 4-week process was we were first unable to go share our code. This was something that was incredibly difficult for both of us, but we used different features to be able to kind of work together. We used the annotate feature on Zoom, where I was able to go specifically mention to Alana about what specific lines were having trouble and what code to be able to implement, and the remote control feature. So I was able to go code using Alana's screen. We were also unable to upload code onto GitHub, but this is something that we were able to communicate directly with Professor and working on that. We've also been able to have a difficulty in determining the feasibility of the design, as a lot of the users were starting to be able to use, and as well as also adapting it from the balsamic, we realized that some of those features were more difficult to be able to implement. So we planned accordingly and we adjusted the scope. Something about kind of the user testing that we've been able to do, some of the recruiting methods, we reached out to friends and family to be involved in our user testing. We recruited about 5 different users of varying sex, age, and demographics. This was great to be able to best determine about how can we best understand the purpose of this application. We use concurrent testing to be able to receive real-time feedback from our users. And we also consider the feasibility after our user testing of how to be able to implement these into our application. To be able to go over how we implemented some of that feedback in each of the different tabs, which Alana will show in a second. In the home screen, users were not able to go see the medical site or their physician button immediately. This was difficult for them to be able to find. So we made these an actual button that stands out to users, as you'll be able to find. In the About Us, people wanted to be able to develop and look and click on the developers' faces. So we were able to link the names of the developers over to their LinkedIn to be able to best understand their background and their experiences and what make them qualified to develop this app. In the drivers section, users wanted to be able to find a way to filter drivers based on location and a way to contact them. With the way that we did this is we used a drop-down menu and as well as also a table to be able to see their location and their phone numbers. In the settings, people wanted to be able to type, people did not want to be able to type out their insurance type. So what we did is we allowed them to be able to choose from an easy to use drop-down menu. I'll let Alana kind of show and demonstrate some of these different ideas, but Alana, take it away.
Great, thank you, Justin. I will share my screen now. Okay. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So this is our website right here. So I'll start with the home screen, this is the home screen. And we really tried to implement a lot of the user testing feedback in this section because as Justin talked about, it was kind of hard for people to navigate this screen. A lot of times people came on and they were asking questions about where to start, what are they supposed to do? So from there, we decided to make this as minimal and simple as possible, but still trying to make it visually appealing. So over here we have the first step, which is you have to indicate whether you want to visit either a doctor or a medical site. So if you click on the doctor button, it takes you to this map. And if you zoom in, you can see your location and the drivers around you and the different sites available and the sites and or the doctors available, and the doctors are listed here by specialty. And if you go back, it's the same sort of concept for medical sites as well. So this is by different locations, so hospitals, urgent cares, rehabilitation centers. We just really wanted to make this as easy as possible for people to navigate and see different options available. Another feature that we added on the home screen for JavaScript was the Google Translate option. We really wanted to make this as accessible to any audience, so which is why we decided to implement this change. From there, we can go to the About Us screen. So this is just a very simple screen talking about our mission and who we are. As Justin said, a lot of the users wanted to see, wanted to click on our faces and wanted to see our bio. So we actually linked it to our LinkedIn page, and we used JavaScript in order to open this in a separate tab because we didn't want the users to exit our screen. So from there, we also have a drivers category. So these are our wonderful drivers, and we filtered it by location. So different drivers will pop up based on the location, and you can contact them and see where they're located as well. And then lastly, we have an insurance category because, as Justin talked about, ideally this app would be covered, or this website would be covered by insurance. So we basically have this filled out. So you can type in, you can indicate what type of insurance you have, type of insurance company, member ID, group number, policy number, and your birthday. And then after that, you just submit it, and then it takes you to the home screen. So yeah, so that was just a quick overview of our website right now.
All right. Thanks so much. Great job. I do have a couple questions. One is, you mentioned that as you were taking user feedback and just deciding on what to implement in general, that you factored in what features were difficult to implement. And I like that you all did that. That's actually not something I covered too much, but it's definitely a component of project management with coding, is factoring in sort of what bring the biggest bang for the buck, so to speak. Could you maybe explain some features that at first you thought would be really cool, but you decided were too difficult to implement?
Sure. So one feature that we really wanted to do was for the maps, the Google API map using JavaScript, because we wanted to make the maps more interactive if possible. So we spent a lot of time trying to implement that, but it just wasn't really working with the code. And it took us some time, but moving forward, if that's something that we can implement, I think that would be really great for this app.
Gotcha. And then I liked the way that you formatted your explanation of user testing. Could you go over maybe one of the results from that user testing that really surprised you and you feel led to a much better end result?
I would say probably one of the most kind of surprising things that we were finding is just how confused people were just at the beginning, because our original kind of concept, the medical site and the find a physician, were not at the center, and there was just a kind of a main map, and everyone wanted to be able to kind of go utilize and work on that map. They weren't able to go find the find a physician or the medical site feature. So we ended up kind of blowing that up and making that part of just the big home screen, and then we put the maps in those respective kind of tabs. So that was something that we originally kind of thought was like, okay, it's kind of standard. But then when we were actually doing the 5 different user testing, it was helpful.
Yeah, and I think your solution around that was very elegant. It reflects what a lot of other, especially medical sites, do, where they definitely have sort of a multi-tiered user base, where they might have patients on one side, providers on the other. And so they often do start first with that question, what are you looking for?
Mhm.
I thought
And
that
it was
a
great
solution
because we
for
were
that.
able to get such a varied opinions, kind of based on just an older generation rather than someone who was more in the younger generation, seeing about how much we had to be able to kind of probe them and how much they were kind of able to actually interact and tell us about what they were thinking. So it was a good experience for us as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll open it up to the rest of the class for a Q&A.
I just want to say good job. I think it was like pretty interacting. And I liked the map where you were able to see like where your location was and then who was around you. I think that can help the user kind of just like know what facilities are around them. So that's good.
Thank you, Maria.
I don't really have a question, but I just like to say good job. And I really like the idea that you guys linked your LinkedIn profiles in the About Us. I didn't actually think about that. That's pretty good.
Anyone else?
I have a question, but I just wanted to say like good job, y'all, for like trying to like work everything together, even though like GitHub was like giving you a lot of trouble.
Yeah, we had to jump through a lot of different hurdles, but it ended up kind of working pretty well, and we still have to figure out how to put it into GitHub, but one step at a time.
Actually, yeah, I'd like to throw that question back to you just to get a little bit more insight into how you worked around that and were able to function as a team.
So it
I know
kind
you
of made
mentioned like annotate and all of that, but just sort of how did that Scrum work when people weren't able to submit to GitHub?
Yeah, I mean, it would be something where Alana would be sharing her screen, and then I would just be annotating, and I would just kind of be doing it, and then I would be explaining at the same time as what I was doing. And she was able to go comment, "Oh, I think it should actually be on line 17, not line 18."
Mm-hmm.
So we were doing that, and then also using the annotation feature, we were able to go say, put a comma here, star this line. This line is something that's going difficult. It would have been easier if we were actually in person. I was able to kind of look over her shoulder, but it would have even been easier if I was able to get the code at the same time. But we still worked around. We had additional meetings if necessary to also go over and implement a lot of those changes.
Did you think that there were any benefits that you got from doing it in a slightly alternative way like that?
I think so. I think it made it a lot more collaborative, and that when I was going to be able to make a change, I also had to be able to consult Alana and be working directly with her. And that made it a lot quicker as well, because I wouldn't have to go make the change and then ask, "Oh, Alana, what do you think?" And then if Alana made the same change as well, I wouldn't have to have overrid kind of her response as well. Alana, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree with that, Justin. I think it was definitely a lot more collaborative than we probably would have been initially if we were sharing our code. So I think it worked out.
Great. Well, thanks so much. Good job. And we'll move on to the next project, which is the drone team.
Okay, I'll go ahead and share my screen and then Danny's going to start.
Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. Our presentation is going to be about our application, which is a pharmacy drone delivery, or as we named the app or website, MedDrone. My team consists of me, Maria, and Michael. Next slide, please. As for our role specifically, I would say we all kind of contributed equally when it came to both HTML and CSS. And then Michael and myself delved a little bit deeper with the JavaScript itself, and you'll see how that reflects on our demo. As for specific roles, I think Maria kind of helmed the Scrum Master, where she was able to clearly define like the user stories for the team and what she kind of wanted implemented. And Michael and both Maria kind of were in charge of the user stories. Meanwhile, I was more, I guess, geared towards kind of developing the skeleton of the website itself.
Thank you,
Next
Danny.
slide.
Thank you, Danny. So I can walk us through the user story now. So Our user story is, as a patient that needs life-saving medications daily, I want a faster and more reliable form of receiving my medications by living in a rural area. So we really wanted to cater our application to individuals who need these medications, but generally don't have accessibility to them. And so these are the 4 key components that we wanted to incorporate into our website design or our user interface. So the first was obviously to allow patients to order and to refill their prescriptions on our website. So here they would have their old pharmacy, a list of their pharmacy medications available to them, what they had ordered in the past, and see how many refills they had available. Also, in the checkout page, the patients would be able to choose exactly what type of delivery service they would like. So our purpose was mostly geared towards drone, but also some patients who had maybe pharmacies accessible to them or other like locations that they could pick up from if they didn't want specifically to be shipped to their home for, let's say, privacy or security reasons. And then with this, also the patients were able to decide where, when, and what time they wanted to receive the medications. And then an additional component we wanted to incorporate into our website design was allow the patients to be very engaged with our company members and be able to receive a 24-hour support service or be able to have a quick access where they would be able to chat with them. And then Danny will go over those features once we present our live demo. And so moving into the Agile methodology that we did for our specific group, we listed the user story here in these 3 different colors. So the first was to build a drug order checkout. Then we wanted to create a user or an easy interface for the user. And we also wanted to, again, allow them to enter time, location, and date for delivery. And so these are the different things that we had to do in order to incorporate these elements of the user story into our website. And so as we completed them, we obviously shifted them into the in progress during the process of compiling our website. And then after we were done, we noted it here. So this is just kind of like an overall representation of how we utilize the Scrum board process in our project, and then how it essentially helped us incorporate all the components in the end to make sure that we didn't miss anything. And then now Michael will go over the user testing for us.
Hi. So we conducted interviews with 4 different people. One of them was a colleague, and then 4 of them were family members. So we used the concurrent think aloud method just to see what they're thinking while they're doing it. And so some of the comments included that our initial website design was a bit confusing, and the drone button and the image button on the initial website had like both the same destination, and so that was like led more than one person to like find that confusing. And then there was a problem adding and removing drugs in that it doesn't upload onto the website, and then certain buttons on the initial design were very unclear in what they were supposed to do. Then next slide. Okay, so one of the things that we changed in terms of the website was, if you can see here on the left in the circle here, people were confused as to the purpose of like these different color boxes. And so hold on. Yeah, so people were confused about that. The formatting, people had mixed reactions about the initial formatting here on the left. And then on the right is, yeah, and so on the right, this is the more updated version of the card. And so we kind of use that to update it to a more or less confusing one. In the next slide. Okay. And so another part of it that we changed based on the user feedback was here on the left in the initial design. They had the like fill a prescription, the get advice now portions of it, but we were told that it would be better or more intuitive if they had buttons right there to go to different sections of the website to actually like, you know, fill out a prescription or like actually get advice and all that. And so on the right here, we actually added some functionality to these and changed the formatted them to actually be more easier to use. And then next slide. Okay, so in next we're gonna go over the live demo.
Thank you, Michael.
I can share mine for the live demo. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, sorry about that. It's my dog. Okay, can you guys see it?
Yep.
Okay. I'm not sure if it shows like this black screen entirely shows like the full screen for you guys. On my monitor, it shows that it's only like half filled up, but I have a rather big monitor, so. Okay, so this is our demo for our application Medrone. We wanted to make like a simple homepage to, I guess, kind of make like an inviting.
Hey, Danny, would
yeah.
you mind zooming in on your browser? Just
Yeah.
one notch. Yeah, perfect.
There you go. Okay. Yeah, so sorry. What we initially wanted to start with when the user starts or enters our homepage is to basically just have a little welcoming page to kind of, I guess, make it seem more interactive for them. So once you click Get Started, it brings you to our homepage. I'm sorry, do you need me to zoom in on this too, Professor, or?
I think this is fine.
Okay. So as Michael described from the user stories, we want to implement a more interactive user face for or from the feedback from the user stories. And where we can start for that is for the full subscription. Like once you click this, it'll bring you to the cart that we had implemented. Initially, when we had wanted to put in a cart, we figured out it'd be a little too difficult to implement all the things like having an amount of money and things like that. But we just settled on something that was more simplistic, where you're able to see things like your current drugs that have a certain amount of refills. And then filling out this form, like, for example, really quickly, you can just, and when you submit it, and you can choose which type of delivery service that you want, like either through drone, through pharmacy pickup, or from mail to home. And the date, you can choose which date you want to implement or want it to be delivered, and then what time specifically, depending on the time of day. And you click this, and when you submit the form, and it should pop up like this, which is very simple. We didn't want to overcomplicate things and, I guess, confuse people. Going back to the home screen, another thing that we wanted to, I guess, support was from Maria's user story was the 24/7 support, and that's achieved through these two buttons right here. One would lead you to a question or a form, I guess, where you're able to submit specifically what kind of question you have. And then if we go back to this, it'll pop up a chatbot. And we wanted to implement a bot where it would have certain dialogue. So like if you say something, or it'll have like or when the user says something or types something, it'll contain like a keyword. And with that keyword, it would auto-populate with a specific phrase that will direct the user to like their solution. But we thought that was a bit too difficult. So we just wanted to show what it would look like overall. And then below here, it displays pharmacies for users in their local area. So we implemented maps in Riverside, Claremont, and Long Beach. I guess one step further we could have taken was to specify which pharmacies would be specifically for like drone delivery or for pharmacy pickup itself, or for mail order, like original mail order. And then the next tab would be pharmacy, where users are able to learn more specifically about their drugs, and I guess get a bit more information, like seeing the status of when or if their drug is available for refill at the moment, how many refills they have, when it was last filled. And we also wanted to include like a little overview of when if user clicks this right here, it'll take them to a WebMD page where they can get more information about their drug specifically. And now I will pass on to Maria to talk more about like checking the status of a user's order.
Thank you, Danny. So if we go to order status, can you zoom in just a little bit? Thank you. So here we wanted to incorporate the components of if a patient wanted to cancel their drug for any reason, or if they just wanted to check the status of where it was, they would be able to do so on this page. So listed here in the top is the first medication that the patient successfully delivered to their home. And then the other two showed the different statuses. So the second one was accepted and the last one was packed. In the case of if, like, let's say a patient wanted to cancel their order, then they would just click on the button cancel order. And then it would open up a dialogue and ask them the reason why they wanted to cancel. And then so they would just input, for example, like wrong medication or not needed anymore. And then they would just enter a cancel order, and then they would receive a notification afterwards. We didn't necessarily include the notification following cancel order, just because it took us a while to incorporate all of the components for the order status page, but that was like the process in terms of the functionality that we wanted for this. And then Michael will guide us through the About Us page.
Yeah, okay, so sorry, I was mute. So for this page, we just did a brief overview of the team up top, and then on bottom we each implemented a little bit about us here. Just like our program and background here. And then, yeah, and then I think, is that the end? I think.
So that's it, thank you.
All right, thanks so much. Great job. I'll ask the same question that I asked of dispatch. What would you say was the user testing result that really was most informative or helped you really move your site to where it needs to be the most?
I think the most important feedback that we got was that the interface, or our original interface, wasn't too interactive, and it just kind of just had information displayed there rather than leading the users somewhere. And it didn't really give them a really good sense of what our application was behind, or like what kind of actions they could have performed. So that's why we took it, or we used the feedback to kind of implement a more interactive user face for that.
Yeah, and I did notice that it looks like your site went through at least a couple iterations where it almost looked like you had a fully formed site in the before, and then it turned into a completely different site after user testing. Is that correct, or could you maybe shine some light into that process?
Yeah, so originally it was very more simplistic, I think, where we had we kind of had everything on one page, and it wasn't too much as opposed to our current iteration, whereas there's multiple things in the nav bar. On our original one, we did have a nav bar, but when you click things, it didn't really do anything. Like, it didn't take you to another page or anything, and we just kind of had everything on one page. So it wasn't too complicated. It was very simplistic, and so then that's why we felt like we wanted to make it I guess seem more as like a regular website as opposed to just having everything on one single page.
It was just a scroll. It was just like a big page with scrolls, and when you would click on the nav bar, it would just take you to that specific section on the page. So as Danny said, there wasn't a lot of pages for the user to go through.
Mm-hmm. And then what would you say was the hardest thing to implement? or just the hardest part about the project?
I think one of the harder things to implement was the check status or the check order page, just
Mhm.
because it kind of had a lot more to the code as opposed to everything else. And just kind of getting those things right will make all the difference, as especially for the users. Overall, I think one thing that was a bit difficult for us, kind of similar to Justin and Alana, was that we had difficulty kind of getting GitHub, like being able to implement everything itself. Like I know we asked you for a bit of advice, and then I believe Maria and Michael met with you specifically in office hours to kind of rectify that issue. And so then before or until we were able to kind of get used to GitHub and working on the code by ourselves, and then when having to push it, we kind of were stuck, or like we didn't really work on our website as much because we didn't know what kind of approach we would want to take and how we'd work on the code without like overriding the code with one another or things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it was interesting when Justin and Alana were speaking about their team that they were able to work together. So it was like very seamlessly and like, oh, do you want to make this change? Like, do you approve? Do you like that? Whereas with us, it was more of like, we had the wireframe to guide us, but we also wanted to, like, I think we worked separately and then we would send screenshots of what we did. And then if the team liked it, then we would push them. We all kind of like tried to work collaboratively, but also I think it took us a little bit longer just because we work separately.
Mhm. Okay, that makes sense. But great job overall. Does anyone have any questions for the team? Or comments?
I was hoping you guys can clarify, what do you mean by we don't bite usually? No, but in general, I thought it was a great presentation. Really, really well thought out, amazing tabs. Great stuff.
So it's super pretty.
Thank you.
I'm curious, did you use any sort of library for some of those pop-ups or for the chat bot?
So most of the things that we used were from Bootstrap
Gotcha.
templates. Yeah.
Mhm.
Great. Well, thanks so much. Very good looking site. Next up, we'll go with My Health Story.
Are y'all able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joanne, and my partner in crime is Scott. We are so happy to welcome you to you as our potential clients for our latest product. But before we start, we'd like to pose a question. When was the last time y'all went to the doctors, had to fill out forms, tell your healthcare team your medical history, prescriptions, etc. again? Wait, doesn't this sound familiar? Have you ever dreamed about having a one-stop hub to store all of your medical records? Well, you're not really dreaming now. It might just be deja vu. We present to you My Health Story, an inclusive and accessible one-stop shop or one-stop hub for your medical health records. For the user story, as a patient, I want to be able to have a place to store all of my medical info so that I am able to easily access it when I want to, while entering the least amount of information as possible, especially for users that are not as computer literate or tech savvy. This is our homepage. In terms of the language, I just want to highlight the language bar that we were taught how to do with the Google API. And each of the tabs that our patients or our users would be on are actually highlighted just so it's just easily accessible and they remember where they are.
Yeah, so going to our About Us page, I just wanted to say that Joanne and I come from different backgrounds, but we worked collaboratively on this project. We met bi-weekly and set goals for ourselves. We worked off our wireframe to create a product really focused on the patient's point of view. And even though we assigned ourselves like leaders to both the front and back end roles, we really worked together throughout this process to create My Health Story. And so moving to the contact page, if anyone were to ever have any questions, they can submit a question or a ticket here. And by pressing the submit button, a successful message would pop up saying your response has been sent in. And we also included a map over here on the right to show the location of our headquarters. And so moving to the login page, the user has the option to either sign up or log in if they already have their login credentials and have created an account.
I just want to point out that we have a terms of privacy for folks, and just wondering if your information will be.
So upon logging in, it will take you to the overview page. Here, the user can easily see all the different sections within My Health Story. So we can move into the appointments tab. So following our user story, as a patient, I want to keep track of my appointments so that I'm able to prioritize my health and attend my appointments. So at the top, you can add a new appointment, enter your provider and clinic name, the reason for your visit, location, date, and time, and any notes with the appointment. And one thing from user testing is that a lot of folks enjoy having the toggle for entering the date and time. It's a lot easier for them. And upon submitting your appointment, it will populate down in the bottom table. And it's basically like a calendar for all your health appointments, reason for visit, and any notes.
Let's move to the demographics. As all of you know, filling out forms is not great, or not fun, at least for most people. It is fun for me, but on the contrary, this is a place where you can have all of your information stored, especially your emergency contact, which is very important. Most of the time on our phones, it's just their phone numbers. Here, we also have all of this other information. And then you can always save and confirm your changes.
And one other thing I did want to mention about the user testing is that a lot of folks said that it was easier to create like a drop-down menu, like on the top right corner you see, so you can easily navigate to any of the sections within the website. You don't always have to go back to the overview page to get to wherever you want to go.
For the daily log, initially I know I had like a lot of stuff going on the page, but we just decided to make it more simple in the sense that there's a blood pressure tool. Does anyone want to give me their blood pressure to enter?
120/80.
120/80. That is high blood pressure. That's like borderline now. So anything lower than 120/80 is actually normal, or yeah. And then let's say that someone is in danger. Then hypertensive crisis, please seek emergency care will show up. And then since most of the populations or users might have hypertension or diabetes, then they are able to track that basic information here and have it populated down here in the table as well. So for my medical history, the original template had a lot going on. So this allows users to add in what they do want to by adding more here and then saving.
So the providers page, as a patient, I want to be able to have a place where I can save all my provider information so I can quickly contact them instead of fumbling through business cards. And so at the bottom, you could see I already have my OB/GYN, my radiologist and cardiologist information saved. And I'm going to add my new primary care provider, Dr. Castillo. And you can also upload pictures of your doctor and his or her business card. So that way you can easily have that information on hand, and you can click submit and it would populate into that table, and there's his information.
So originally, what I had was just a form where you would just enter all of your patient's information, your provider's information. From the user testing, we realized that not everyone's going to be able to type up all that information, or nor do they want to. So if they just take a picture of it on their phone and just like upload it here, it'd be so much more easier. And then some folks also mentioned that sometimes, I guess for older folks, if they have like Alzheimer's or like something, they kind of just want to like see who their doctor is, then there's an image here. Prescription.
So moving on to the prescriptions, I want to have a place where I can log all my prescriptions in case I forget to take them, or if I'm not sure if I still need to take a certain medication. And here you can see Joanne is entering my new prescription. She's uploading a copy of the pill and the bottle itself. That way I have the information on hand. And at the bottom, you can already see all of my current prescriptions I'm taking, as well as the refills I have remaining.
So we decided to switch to picture format also because sometimes patients might type in the wrong like pill bottle name, and then at least with this, then they can actually like visualize it and make sure that it's the right prescription. So for the medical reports, we understand how difficult it may be to request your own medical health records from other facilities and providers. So with My Health Story, we're providing a medical release authorization form that you would fill out and then take to your provider or the clinic, and then they can send it back to us or send your information to us, and we will have it populated onto your login account. And then if you already have your medical records, then you can upload it yourself as well. So easier access.
And so here is our insurance page. You can enter your medical insurance information, like the name and then your medical insurance card. That way you always have it on file and it's like a digital copy. And it's easy for the patient to access whenever they're in their doctor's office. And it would auto-populate right there.
And also the same type of feedback where it would be easier for patients to have images of their cards and not like carry and like fumble through them looking for them. And then I think that's it. You'd log out, and then for your privacy, just remember to close the browser, but you can click around and have some fun before that.
Great job. A lot of really cool features there. I noticed that one thing you mentioned a couple times was that going from complex to simple. Was that something that came out of user testing, or at what point did you decide that was something you needed to do? And then did you have to make tough choices, sort of eliminating things that you might have wanted, but you just had to eliminate in the name of simplicity?
I think personally, like, I know I wanted a lot of things, but then it is like a short period of time, and then we're learning so much in a short period of time, and we're still learning new things in how to like create a better website for patients to use in the future. So I had to learn, I think what I learned from this class was like to really like embrace the MVP idea and like be okay with that. And then let's see. So for the simplicity, it was really the user testing as well. Because I have a friend that's in their third year medical school, and they gave a lot of like insightful feedback in terms of like what they see day to day in during their rotations as well.
So with that person that you mentioned, was it more of a one-time user testing, or did you go back to that person multiple times?
It was one time.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. I haven't shown him like my final product yet.
Gotcha. It'd definitely be interesting to, I mean, obviously this is outside the class, but to show him how it progressed and what his thoughts were. Because and then that might lead to even more work on this, because at this point it's your project, so you all can do with it what you want. I have one other question. So even though I know you were moving towards simplicity, there's still a lot of stuff. And so what is the easiest way for a user to access it? Is it through that homepage with all the panels? Would you mind maybe walking through that again, sort of now that we've seen all the features, how a user might be able to get back at them?
Okay. So once they sign in, this would be like their landing overview page. And then if you were to like click onto demographics and you wanted to get out of it, you would just go to my profile. Those would be on the side.
Gotcha. Cool. Well, I'll open it up to the rest of the class. Any questions?
I was just blown away. I don't know, every single page I was like, oh my God, they have so many features. They have literally like 10 JavaScript, so many CSS. And it was incredible. Great work. It shows you guys did a lot of effort.
Thank you.
Can I tell you the truth?
Yeah, I know someone else did it.
No. No, I actually asked Professor Will for permission if I would be able to do it. Since we don't have a database or anything like that, then essentially like everything that's submitted is really just like hidden, and then my button would make it appear.
You did not have to tell me that. The magic is gone. How'd you do the
not there yet.
How'd you do the logout screen? The one with the interactive?
So this is something that we found on CodePen that we thought was really cute.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Oh, that's interesting. So you grabbed that from CodePen. I'd like you to talk a little bit to that, because I know sometimes CodePen, it can be great because you can copy a lot of existing code to make it do something that you find cool as you're searching through the different repositories. But sometimes when you do that, there's a lot of junk code that you have to sort of pare away in order to make it work well with your site. Did you find that was an issue at all?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Okay, I can actually speak to that, because I found for the login page, I found the that basically on CodePen. And when we implemented it, it was like very difficult. Like the button didn't take you to the login button, did not take you to the overview page. So I had to like go in there and like kind of change things around. And we took maybe like 2 weeks to figure it out. And Joanne finally figured out a way to like create that into like another button. And it was just kind of like playing around with their existing code and making it for our website.
Yeah, and this is why I don't mind you all copying code, because oftentimes it ends up being almost harder to try to make someone else's code work on your website than if you were to make it yourself. But at the same time, in the process of trying to make it work, I feel like you end up learning a lot about how they ended up building what they built. Did you find that was the case? And was there anything that you'd say that you learned through the sort of copying from CodePen process?
I think it was definitely like learning, okay, this, like I'm seeing this, like I've seen it in class and in lecture and your live demos and stuff, and then seeing it on CodePen, I'm like, okay, I recognize that, but it's a little different. So I need to change this. So I'm still like recognizing everything on CodePen, but just I think a little bit more advanced or different in some ways. So it definitely is like a learning process.
Yeah, and a lot of being a good coder is pattern recognition. So being able to see, oh, this is similar to back when I made X product, and all I have to do is change a few parameters within it. You know, it's to the point where most solutions, they have at least a few, or most problems have at least a few solutions to them. And usually the solutions I roll with are the ones that look similar to something I've done before, because I know that's going to be easier for me to understand. Any other questions for the team?
Joanna, can you talk about more about, I know you said that it was really difficult for you to stick with the concept of an MVP. Can you explain a little more detail? Just because I think my team had a similar problem, not problem, but like obstacle.
No, I think it's just because I started with like a lot of things and like wanting to put all of that out as like a perfectionist, and then like learning to just like be okay with like where I am, and then like show that to people and then learn from that.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Maria, I'll throw that back to you. Talk to the class a little bit about, and this could be anyone on your team, about your struggles with the MVP and maybe pushing out something that's not quite as perfect as you might want it to be.
Yeah, I think like Joanna, I think I'm a perfectionist like in some type of thing. So initially when the things didn't necessarily match up with what we had in the wireframe, I was kind of just like, oh, like this is going to be really difficult. So like me, Danny, and Michael would always like, I feel like they would always ask me like, oh, do you like this? Do you like this? And I'd be like, yeah, that's great. Like I wanted them to also incorporate like their ideas and their components and not just mine. So I tried to really make it collaborative. But then I also had to learn and like take a step back that obviously we're not like I don't know, like a famous coder, but we're not them. And like we're just like at the forefront. And I think it was just fun like learning. And I think just like knowing where we are and like Joanne said, just learning how to take it step by step.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a lot of not really coding in general, but agile methodology, I think specifically, is about letting go of perfectionism and knowing that what you think is perfect is inherently imperfect if it doesn't include customer input. And so being able to get comfortable with putting something that isn't quite perfect yet out to the customer so that they can help you make it perfect, I think is really critical. So it's a struggle that everybody has. It's a struggle that I continue to have to this day. And it's just one of those things that the more you practice with putting imperfect prototypes out there to customers to make them as good as they can be, the easier it becomes. Anything else? All right, well, we will finish up the presentations with Metapod.
I'm sorry, Professor, you kind of lagged on my screen. You were
Oh,
frozen.
sorry,
Yeah.
Metapod.
Okay.
You guys are up.
Yeah. All right. Let me share my screen. Okay, so hi, everyone. Welcome to our presentation. So first of all, our team consists of me, Tristan, and John. In terms of roles, I had myself listed as the Scrum Master of the team. Tristan was responsible for the quality assurance, and John was the lead of user testing. However, I am sure we definitely shared all these responsibilities together. But for the coding purposes, Tristan and I equally shared the HTML and CSS of the project, while John focused on the JavaScript with a little bit of HTML. All right, so let's get right into it. So today we will go over our podcast platform that we designed called Metapod. So we decided on this name as it's a play on words with the Pokemon Metapod, if you guys know what it is, and a combination of medical podcasts as well. As you can see on the top left, our logo is actually a Metapod in a doctor's outfit. That was just like some fun things we did. So, all right. So the first thing we'll go over is the homepage. So as soon as the user enters our website, they will be directed to this page. Initially, we had all this information in one like straight column where the intention is above, the user stories. And but like due to some of our user inputs, like from user testing, they recommended that we should place like some of the information or utilize more of the page, like placing them more to the right, because so it wouldn't feel as empty, because earlier or before it all had everything on the left and there's nothing on the right. So following their advice and following the design rules we actually learned from class, we made this layout, which actually kind of follows a Z pattern. Like you first look at the top, the Metapod, and then into the title and with the navigation bar right underneath it. And then afterwards, the user will be able to look on the left and read the intention. And this intention actually will show the purpose of the website. And yeah, so Metapod is designed to help the healthcare workers keep up to date with the latest technologies, discoveries, issues, and news in the medical world. Metapod allows their users to either host their podcasts to talk about any relevant topic in the medical world, while also allowing others to listen and share their opinions regarding the same topics. So if they would actually like to hop right in after reading that, they can click on the Get Started, which will immediately take you to the account page where they can eventually create an account. You can also click on the Learn More if you want to further explore the website, and this will take you to the help page. So Get Started will lead you to the account page, and the Learn More will take you to the help page. These pages will actually be discussed further on later. So lastly, on the right side of the page, this is like where the user will see any like highlighted reviews that people or users will give us later on. And so this excerpt right here is actually made by the extremely nice and awesome Dr. Joe. So at least he was there for us. And then, so in terms of the layout page, we actually wanted to incorporate the green theme in our website to match Metapod's colors. Initially, we actually had a brighter green background with a darker green nav bar, and our text was actually in black color. But from like our user testing, we actually were informed a lot by almost all of our user testing that the green was so overpowering, and it was so hard to read the text. And so what we decided to do is to place a darker green background with the gradient, so it's not as overpowering anymore. And we switched the colors of the nav bar and the buttons, where it has a darker background with a lighter font. So we think it's actually a little bit more visually pleasing now. And lastly, we also created this footer on the bottom of the page indicating on copyright rights of Metapod and give credit to the developers. This footer will actually show up in most of our pages. But with that, I will actually hand it off to Tristan to talk about the next page.
So assuming the user has visited the website, read the home page, and decides to jump straight into the next tab, which would be the following page, they will be brought to this, which will be similar to the account page, but as a login screen. And so once they are prompted to log in and they enter in their username and password, they will be brought to their page of following podcasts, so they can see any new updates from the people that they like the most. However, if they have not created an account yet, they can then head over to browse to search for the new ones, or go ahead to go to the account page and set up their account. Initially, we we had this page very sparsed out. The layout was very ugly in simple terms. And so what we ended up doing is a lot of CSS to create a container to fit this box into, so that we could pad and set margins exactly for where we wanted these boxes to be. We also have a remember me button. So in the future, we would add cookies so that we can remember the username and password, as well as a forgot password in the bottom right. And if they ever wanted to quit, the cancel button will actually take them back to the home page. And so if we go back to the following page and we assume that the user has just made an account and has not followed anything yet, we can go click on the browse button, which will bring us over to the browse page, and John will discuss this in further detail.
So of course, on a podcast platform, you'd want to know what kind of podcasts there are. So I have this page set up so it's searching by topic. We did receive feedback from Will and from users about searching by name too. And I was still trying to figure out the sorting by different like filters, I guess. So you can start typing and it'll sort by different topics. And so the ones that are in that topic will show up. And so there's different ones, like we have placeholders right now for surgery, medical school, nursing, and it's all based in like a table, and you can hover over and click on a topic, and a topic will go to, like, say if we clicked on nursing, nursing would go to all the podcasts with nursing, and then you could search within that for like a certain podcast if you knew it was about nursing. But if you go to, like, if we found a podcast that we liked, like Scissors and Scrubs, we can click on this and it would go to a page for the podcast. I know we could embed like our own audio, but there was, all these podcasts already had their Spotify links. And so we embedded the Spotify on here, and it has the description of the podcast. And if you really wanted to listen to it, you could. But
this podcast is part of the Everyday Heroes Podcast Network, the network for first responders and those who support them.
Yeah, so they're a cool network. And at the bottom, we could do a review, and the users that we tested with liked the review. Unfortunately, like we were talking about before with finding code that online that worked, and finding the junk code, I was still sorting through the junk code and couldn't figure out how to get the stars to work. I checked all the tags, all the IDs in the classes, and couldn't figure out which CSS file had the correct star formatting, and was trying to figure that out on my own. But you can submit the review and it comes up right there. You could even submit another one if you want and it'd still show up. It's not submitted to anywhere. So if you reloaded the page, it would disappear, but you could, in theory, when this was all working, have reviews for certain podcasts and see what other people had to say about it. And so, yeah, so that's where we're at right now. And I really wish I could have gotten the stars working, but there were so many CSS files in that one thing. But yeah, I'll bring it back to Angelo.
Tristan.
Oh, Tristan, sorry.
So if the user has more questions or from the homepage decides to learn more about our page, he'll be sent to our help page. And this is where we can go through basics and tutorials, where in the future we would add maybe a step-by-step guide on how to upload or how to create an account, get set up, follow, browse, all that stuff, as well as some frequently asked questions. We have an option to report an issue, whether it's for podcasts, whether it's website issue. I guess that's similar to how to contact us. We have search for articles and help forums. This page actually went through a lot of iterations, especially after user testing. Besides all the colors and the font changes, we had them laid out in 2 columns. We had set up 2 separate containers to the left and the right and had them set up in columns. However, the users thought that it might be actually better or better pleasing to the eye if they were just straightforward in a line. And so we ended up taking their feedback and messed around with it and found that this one looked the most simplistic and straightforward for the user.
I guess these links actually don't really work right now. We're still in the process of like, making them. So if you click on them, it actually just goes to like a construction site saying that the site is still under construction. um, but this search for articles actually goes into the google.com, and I have it currently set to how to upload a podcast, but we'll probably be messing with that a little bit more and putting more helpful articles there later on. But that's what we have for the help page currently. But lastly, in the account page, so this page is actually designated to be where users can view and edit their profiles. Here you can see like your name, the profession you indicated when you create your account, whether your reviews that you have that you place in any podcast are helpful. A little bit more about the person, including their email, phone, and their bio on the bottom. So they can also upload any like work links they have, and it will show up on the left side, as well as indicate any specific skill sets, such as like surgery skills or medical device design skills that they want. If they want to edit their profile, there's actually an edit profile button on the top right to edit their profile. And the person will also be able to change their profile picture on this box. The idea here is that you can click on this change photo box, and it should, I don't know if you can see, but like it popped out my folders, and I can like upload it, a picture here. I don't know if you can see that, but yeah. And then, but currently, since this is a prototype, the functions that functionally do not work properly right now, so we have to do further coding to make it function correctly. But our initial goal was to have a basic idea and layout set up for a website and work on the functions later. The main thing we focus on making sure it functions properly is is the whole podcast. You can actually listen to the podcast, as John explained earlier. But yeah, that's pretty much what we have for our website. Yeah, thanks for listening. If you have any questions, feel free to ask us.
Great job. Really impressed by the features that you were able to add in the last week. I think there are a lot of improvements from where y'all were last Monday. Now, given that it was a little bit of a crunch for you all, did you find when you did the user testing for that to be a little bit difficult to implement, or tell me a little bit about how that process went for you all, and also how helpful it was?
I guess I can talk about like some of the parts, like when we actually finished our user testing last Wednesday, and we'll receive, like as I mentioned earlier, receive a lot of complaints about like the layout, like the background color and all that, not visually appeasing, visually pleasing. But so that was actually not that hard to implement. We also like got, I think one thing we actually really struggled in doing is just trying to get the design of the website to, or like when we code, our CSS didn't really do what we wanted to do. Like when we were lighting buttons, it was just like slightly off centered. And even though I put it in center, and I'm just like, why won't you just do what I want you to do? So we spent so much time on trying to trying to make it visually pleasing, because that's what a lot of our user testing was on. But I think John also mentioned earlier about like the functions in the browse in the podcast page. If you can like probably elaborate more on that. Yeah.
I guess in browse it was really, well, I could have coded it so you could switch pages, I guess, to search by name versus topic, or have different filters, but we didn't have that many podcasts either. I guess when I found the search or like sorting table kind of code, I was trying to figure out how not to conflict it with other containers that other people had made too. And then also if it came with styling, how to consolidate all the styling. And that's where I found a problem with the rating stars and how they didn't come out, even though we didn't have stars anywhere else and a similar name. that was really frustrating. Still is frustrating. I wish you could see those stars.
Yeah, it did end up looking good, and I'm definitely impressed that you were able to put inputs and then have those inputs show up on the page. So I definitely liked that plugin that you put in there. I thought also the searching by keyboard was interesting because that's not something that was taught in the class. Could you speak a little bit to how you implemented that, and was it hard? What were some of the challenges that you faced in getting that in?
Yeah, so I believe it's a function that was part of a code that I found. And so it searches like, it goes through like the loops every time you enter an input.
Mhm.
And so it'll just pull it from like in the name column, like it's like the 0 index and the topic is 1. And so I just assigned it to search in the topic column, or yeah, column of the table. And so every time you typed, like instead of, I guess they're all pretty similar topics, so it wasn't like too hard to filter it, I guess. But yeah, it would go different ways like once you started typing more. I think it wasn't that hard since I found it somewhere else.
Mhm.
The implementation wasn't that bad. But all the other ones that I had found, like you mentioned, I found other like searching through lists where lists would be different, where like it wouldn't do that like kind of like live search. In this way, it just made a whole new table to have like the different ones that matched the searching.
Sure. I'll open it up to the class. Do you all have any other questions for the team?
I really like the topic feature that you guys have, because I think if it's something that you're in medical school, you might only want to see the medical school ones, or the nursing, only the nursing ones. So I think that that's a really good way to feature it and filter it.
Yeah, I think it would.
I agree. I think you picked the right top or the right column to filter, because I think if I was using this, I would definitely want to just pick a topic and then choose a podcast from that.
Thank you. I feel like we could have also had like a search bar, just also with the nav bar that could have searched anything, but that's probably something, for further development.
Angelo, I think you were gonna.
I was no just about to like respond to Justin's comment that I think when we have like maybe way more like podcasts, I think searching by topic would actually helps narrow it down. Because like if you have like a whole database of podcasts, searching medical school will like narrow it down a lot. So I think yeah.
What was the Spotify plugin difficult, or was it just sort of copying a link and putting it in?
It was pretty much copy paste, because I think when you go to like any Spotify, either the web player or like if you have the desktop app and you hit share, there's a link, and then but there's also another drop down that can do embedded code or embed code. But then you can change how it looks and how big it is.
All right. Any other questions for the Metapod team? Okay, well, thanks so much. Well, I think you all deserve a round of applause. I think this is a great demonstration of work from now learned coders. So is there anything about this process where you were maybe surprised about what you were able to accomplish, and surprised at where you are now, or on the other side, surprised at how hard something was with regard to coding?
I mean, I thought it was actually pretty cool that we were able to make an actual website. I always thought it was something that was so lofty that you could never be able to do, or you need months and months of experience. But to be able to do that in just a couple of weeks was a pretty cool and raised my confidence.
Great. I mean, honestly, that's my only goal. It's not really to teach you all the different aspects or syntaxes within coding. It's really giving you that confidence that if 5-10 years down the road, or even sooner, you have an inkling like, man, it really would be great if someone built an app or built a website that would help with this. Suddenly you actually know what that looks like. And even if it's not coding it yourself, you now know how to speak with a coder and be more effective in doing that. I mean, I didn't learn how to code in college. I learned when I paid some developers to build something for me that I felt was important. And I realized that I was paying way too much and they were taking way too long. And so I started to sort of dive into what they were giving me. And that's how I learned. So much of coding, I think, is self-taught. As long as you have that confidence to be able to swim through all of the code and learn about it. So I think you definitely sort of jumped into the deep end of coding, and I see you're all swimming. So that really makes me happy at the end of this class. Anyone else? Maybe aspects that were more challenging. I know that Metapod team, you mentioned layouts, and that's something that to this day frustrates me. It's colors easy, fonts easy, images easy. I mean, even implementing some like cool looking animations can be relatively easy once you get the hang of it, but layout never gets easy. And especially when you start to have to think about different screen sizes, and is something that's going to work on a computer also going to work on a phone? And if not, how are you going to make it look different? So I wish I could say that gets easier, but that remains the hardest part about CSS. You just wish, like, why couldn't this be like PowerPoint or like a wireframe? And maybe that's an innovation to be had, but it's not there yet. So anything else like that where you were surprised at how hard something was?
I think for me, Joanne and I, was the cookies thing. Like, we looked over your lecture like multiple times, but I still couldn't understand. So that's just something we like decided not to incorporate, even though initially we did want to incorporate some sort of cookies things with our login page. But also we thought we were putting too much effort into just one single login page. So we just decided not to go with it.
Sure. Did anyone implement cookies? I don't think I saw it.
I tried to implement cookies on our the login page and their following page. I don't know if it worked because it keeps remembering the username, but it doesn't remember the password. So I'm just like, I don't know if that was actually cookies or not.
I think that might have been more of the browser autofilling form fields. Yeah, so cookies is a tough one. And what makes it even tougher is that you actually can't practice it on your local machine for whatever reason. It only, for me, works once I've pushed it live. So that's definitely a struggle, but it's also a good segue into the last bit of lecture that I'll go through, which is using some of this backend databases. Like I'll actually show you Python, and that's really what you would use instead of cookies. I mean, a lot of people still use cookies, but it's not usually used as that primary storage of information. So don't feel too bad about it. I think if you were to build something for a live audience, you'd probably just end up using a backend language. Who thinks that they'll actually go into coding or at least use some of this coding in their future careers?
I personally was always interested in like the big IT shift and like the coding, and it was something that I wanted to pursue, but I think I'll just be on the front end of developing and tell the developers what I want, and then they can incorporate it for me because it's too difficult for me to code. But I think you brought up a good point, Professor Will, where like now we have the basics of like what it is and knowing of how to tell them like what we want, like, oh, this CSS element or this JavaScript element. So it'll help us talk to them a lot easier.
Great. Anyone else?
I'm not sure if I'm necessarily gonna like dive deeper into coding, but I appreciate like the foundation that you've kind of given to us, because a lot of my friends are actual coders and they like frequently talk amongst each other like what kind of coding they're doing or learning. And like I guess from this course I'm able to like get a better understanding of what they're talking about. So I really appreciate like what we've learned from this course.
Great. Yeah, I think sort of what you both touched upon of being able to speak to a coder is very important. A lot of coders, there's that stereotype of a coder being grumpy or like not wanting to talk to non-coding people, maybe being a little bit intimidating to talk to. And I hope that some of this lowers that and enables you to speak a little bit more, if not as a peer, at least as someone who understands what aspects of what they do is difficult. And that can in turn make you a better manager if you were to happen to have a coder who's on your team. Maybe you're working in R&D, you're in charge of, let's say it's oncology R&D, and they've implemented a part of that team that is maybe bioinformatics, and they're working on trying to figure out optimized targets for a certain disease. Then being able to speak their language at least a little bit, I think will make you a lot more effective in that management role. Great. Well, awesome work. Let's take a 10-minute break, and then we'll go back into it. I only really have about maybe 30 to 45 minutes of lecture on backend languages in Python, and it's really just to serve to get you started if you wanted to learn more about it. And then once that's done, we can either wrap it up early. I'm sure you still have a lot of studying and all that to do. But I'll stick around at least until 5:30, answering any questions that you all might have, or diving into other topics that you might want to know a little bit more about with regard to web development. Okay, so I'll see you back at, let's go with 4:08, and then we'll finish it up.
I have a question.
Yes.
You said you wanted us to submit the code, right? Is it okay if we just like send you the GitHub link?
Yes, that works.
Okay.
That's ideal.
All right. Sure. Awesome. Thank you.
For the rest of the lecture, I'll talk a little bit about server-side code, and this is the aspect of coding that most people refer to as backend code. So if we start with the browser, which is really where you all have been operating up until this point, the server is what's not user-facing. So if the browser is everything that you could right-click a page and see all the code that goes into that, including the JavaScript, HTML, and CSS, the server, you actually can't see at all. So from a security standpoint, if I were to be storing patient data or really anything that I don't want people to be seeing, and that actually includes in general my APIs. So I know that some of you talked about trying to use the Google APIs, where you would sign up to Google and they would give you a secret code that you would then use for making those calls to Google for requesting, certain maps or what have you. Now, you wouldn't want people to be able to access that. So in general, it's better practice to put that information not in the browser, but in the server, because the server it's protected by you, and it's generally protected by a lot of different security mechanisms. Generally, we're not actually using our own servers anymore, but instead we're working with someone like Amazon Web Services or Microsoft Azure or Google Cloud. So we've got sort of the entire security apparatus of those huge companies behind us when we put things behind the servers. So what happens is that server code will insert content into the browser. And I'll show you this in some of the subsequent slides, but essentially within your HTML, you might create little placeholders that say, oh, this is where I want to put my patients, or this is where I want to put my list of, or my algorithm, maybe for hypertension or something like that. And so you would just put that placeholder into your HTML, and then the server would essentially fill those placeholders with data. So as an example, the layout of Facebook might be front-end code, but the list of who your friends are, or the likes, things like that, would be inputted by the server. And then the server also gets and stores data from the database. So your server is essentially code that will say, hey, let me get that list of friends that someone has from my database, and then filter it, manipulate it, whatever you want to do to make your site do what it's supposed to do, and then take the outputs of those algorithms into the browser. So essentially you have your data in the database, you have your algorithms and all sorts of code that figures out, okay, what data do I want? How much of it do I want to put onto the browser? So on and so forth in the server. And then what the user sees is on the browser. So I'll go through one particular framework, and that's the Python Django framework. And the reason I'm doing this specific framework is just because it's the one that I'm most familiar with. But there's many, many frameworks out there. And you just have to pick one that happens to fit your needs. So when the user interacts with the website, their first interaction is usually the URL that they put in that belongs to that website. So I might go to the home page. And when I do that, that is managed on the backend by, in this case, the urls.py. And the py stands for Python. Because in this example, we're going to use a Python framework. Now, the urls.py, it's essentially a switchboard. So it's going to look at my URL and then ask, if this is the URL, what do they actually want to see? So if the URL is about us, then it's going to do all of the acts that are required in order to display the About Us page to you. Now, a lot of the times, what you'll notice, and this is something I'd encourage you to pay attention to next time you use a particular website, particularly one that has filtering, right? Maybe if you're checking your bank statement next and you're trying to filter out your previous statements or filter out your specific credits or debits, look at the URL. Oftentimes you'll see that there's a lot of information, right? Or do you ever try to paste a URL and send it to someone and the URL is like this thick, it takes up the entire phone screen? That's because they're embedding a lot of information into that URL for the backend to figure out what to do with. And oftentimes the longest URLs are like searches or filters or looking at databases, because they'll put like, oh, this is the column that they wanted to filter, or this is the column they wanted to sort, or this was the search term that they put in, and that's just extending the URL. But when you look at that in the future, you can just know that's actually what the website is using to give information to the backend. So the URL then talks to the views. So if our URLs is our switchboard in the Python Django framework, the views is sort of our workhorse. This is what's doing all the algorithms and all the figuring out. So it contains the bulk of the backend code. It also is really where you make queries to the database. And when I say query, I'm really saying, it might say something like, pull all of the doctors that have previously been associated with this given user, right? So let's say that a user is logged in and they're on the View My Doctors page. They're going to go to something like mywebsite.com/doctors. And that URLs is going to bring up a specific set of code within my views that's associated with the doctors page. And now what the views are going to do is they're going to say, okay, Will is visiting the page, and I know it's Will because he's logged in and he's on the doctors page. So he must want to see all of the doctors that he's been associated with. And so it'll make a query to the database that says, let me see all doctors who have been affiliated with Will's previous usage history, and then query them so that we can put them into the HTML. Models is essentially your blueprint for the database. So views talks to models in order to get that information from the database. So within my models, I will probably have a model that's called doctors. And that doctor model will have certain attributes like name, address, hospital, things like that. And then it also might have an attribute that's called users that I provide for. And so it might make a query to models saying, let me get all doctors who provide for Will, because he's my user, and then make that list. If I want to do anything with it, maybe I want to say, you know what, I only want names, I don't need addresses, but I also want their pictures. Then you figure all that out in your views, and then you just put that information onto your HTML template. So template, that's just another name for HTML. So it's just HTML that has these little placeholders. So within my template, instead of having to draw up a whole table, I might just say, hey, put my doctors in this place. And then my backend is going to basically inject all of those doctors that got queried into the template. Does that make sense? So essentially you have a template that doesn't have all the code that it's going to need in order to show up for the user. But the server side work, our URLs, our views, and our models are going to fill the rest of that template. Now, one downside, although you really, if you need a dynamic site, then you pretty much have to use backend. But one downside of it is that all of this work has to be done in general before the page loads. So your sites are actually very quick because they don't have to load anything. It's just HTML and it's all there. It's all pre-populated. So those will be a very quick site. Sometimes the work that I'm doing in my URLs, my views, or my models is so time consuming that it takes several seconds for a page to load. So what you'll find if you ever end up getting into some of this backend coding is that once it's there, it's more than half the battle, right? You're maybe like 80% done, but you're going to really have to work on that final 20% to make this code efficient now so that your page doesn't take 10 seconds to load. Because if a user has to wait for really more than like 4 seconds for a page to load, they're just going to leave. So I just replaced this now with a couple icons. So this is specifically the Python is the language, and then Django is the framework that uses this URLs, views, and models setup. All other frameworks, they use a very similar setup, right? They've got some sort of thing that's associated with our database, something that's associated with our algorithms, and then something that takes the user input in terms of what URL they're coming from to really know which of my algorithms are going to be used for a given page. Any questions about this? So this is a simplified example where I've got a database, and our databases, they really just look like Excel sheets. So this is an example of a model here, and this is a user model. So you can see that the first column is the user ID, second column is passwords, and you can see that they're encrypted. You got another column of last login, Are they a super user? What's their email? Are they active users? So on and so forth. This could be hundreds of columns if you want it to be. So my Python language, this is my views, right? So my views talk to my models. My view is talking to my database, and it's doing it right here. So first off, my URLs, they know who the user is. They know if they're logged in or not. And in the case of Python, that person is called the requester. So in this case, it's request is sort of the shorthand for that. So if I want to know my user's information, I can create maybe a profile name, and it's the request, user, and their name. If I want a picture, it would just be the request, user, and then their picture. There could be other information in the request as well, any cookies or session data that someone might have. And all those things are used for example, when you go on Netflix and it says, continue watching your previous movie that you hadn't finished yet, that information is usually retrieved within request. Now this friends equals user.objects.get. This is essentially a query. So what it's doing is if my database that I'm looking at here is my list of users, then I want to get all of my objects, and an object is a row that are friends with the user. So friends with would be a column. It's not shown here, but let's say that there's a column that says friends with, and then it has every single person that William or Marco are friends with. This right here is a filter. So I'm saying I want all my users, well, actually not all of them. I just want all of them that are friends with the user who's here. So instead of it being, if this were the case of Facebook or Instagram, instead of it being billions of people that are listed under friends, it's just going to be the people who are friends with the given user. So a lot more manageable. And then this return dict is just basically, this is saying these are the variables that I want to insert into my HTML template. So we just talked about how I get data from models, but then we also need to put that into my HTML template for the user to see. So in this case, you can see that instead of under name, instead of me writing, Will, I'm just saying placeholder, I want you to put whatever the profile name is. And so my profile name I define here. So I'm just saying profile name equals whatever I defined earlier as profile name, which I did up here. It's the request user. Profile pic is the pic, which is the request user pic. And then my friends, because this is actually going to be a list, right? It's going to be a list of rows who are friends with the request user. So it might be hundreds or even thousands of items in the list. So I'm going to say for f and friends include their name, f.name, and their pic, f.pic. So this might be hundreds or even thousands of rows long. Does that make sense? So you can see that in a lot of ways it operates very similarly to JavaScript, but it's a little bit more robust because you don't have to use cookies. You can store gigabytes, terabytes of data into your database, and you can do a lot of different manipulations on the back end in ways that make it so that only you can see the data, or only the user who's allowed to see the data can see it. So it's a lot more secure, and then also a lot more efficient than something like JavaScript. You can also probably see that the syntax, so the sort of the look of the code with Python is a lot cleaner than the look of the code with JavaScript. And that's just sort of a user preference thing. There's other languages like PHP, which is what a lot of Facebook is built off of, that are not quite as clean. But Python, I like it because it reads a lot more like English, as opposed to some strange code with a lot of symbols and semicolons and things like that. So creating a local server, this is the biggest barrier, I think, to really doing backend during a class like this. I think you all saw that just installing Git was a little bit of a struggle. So this is just another one of those things that you'd have to figure out on your own because there's no single way to do it. It depends on what your computer is, what you've already got installed on it, and so on and so forth. But I've included a bunch of links here so that you can figure out how to, use your command prompt, use your terminal, install Python 3 if you want to use Python, use certain package managers in order to download all of the frameworks and environments that you need. Django, this is the framework that I just explained to you all. If you click this link, then it just gives you this quick install guide. So you can see that there's actually not a tremendous amount involved here. But you do need to have your command prompts and all of that set up in order for it to work properly. You already have a text editor, so that's great. And then after that, you would start a Django project. So this is a little bit more involved than the last page I showed you, but you can see that it's not that bad. You just check that you have Django, assuming that you downloaded it, you should. And then you click this start project and then Metapod or Dispatch or Medrone, whatever you want to put here, then it will create the framework of that project for you. So the urls.py, the views.py, the models.py that I showed you a couple slides back, those actually end up being created automatically. And then once you've got all of that set up, you should be able to go into that folder with using your terminal or your command prompt, and then just type this piece of code, Python manage.py run server, and then it will actually create a server on your computer. So that way you can connect to a database and pull all of the data you need to pull. So I also created a few links to learning Python. You can learn Python for free on Codecademy if you like that format. I think Python 3 actually costs a little bit of money. You have to sign up. I don't think it's a lot, like $20 or something to get a pro account. You could also get a free Python 3 tutorial from python.org, which is really the authoritative source for Python, but it's sort of less user-friendly than, say, the Codecademy is. And then there's also a great site called learnpython.org. So I think between these three, you should be able to learn everything that you need to learn about Python. I will say that Python, without a doubt, is easier than JavaScript. So I gave you a more difficult language to learn because it's also a front-end language. So it's a little bit easier to implement onto your computer. But once you've got Python implemented on your computer, it's a lot easier to play around with than something like JavaScript. And there's a lot of cool things you can do with it. Back in February, I used Python to create a script that automatically would pull clinic availabilities for vaccinations on demand. So we were running it every 10 minutes and then displaying it to community leaders in underserved communities that were not getting vaccinated at the same level as, say, more affluent communities. And it was very easy. It took probably 2 hours to build the whole thing. And it's something that they still use to this day. So it's a very robust code. And with only maybe that's 60 lines of code, you can do a lot of good things with it. So I would highly recommend, if you want to learn a new language, start with Python. It's very user-friendly. It very much reads like English, and it's also very popular. So moving on a little bit to bigger picture stuff, I do want to talk a little bit about HIPAA. So for pretty much all of yours, except for Metapod, you would fall under HIPAA. So I think Metapod, you could do your thing without having to worry about HIPAA. But the others, because you're asking for patient information, medications, things like that, that would fall under HIPAA. What is HIPAA? It is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. It was passed about 15 or 25 years ago, and it has two major definitions. The first one is covered entities, which is essentially any healthcare provider that is engaging in electronic transactions. And then there's also protected health information, also known very frequently abbreviated as PHI. And PHI is any information that relates to the past, present, or future health condition of an identifiable individual. And I bolded identifiable because if it's de-identified, in other words, if it's just maybe clinical trial data or overall data from a hospital of how the population is doing, and there's no way for you to trace that back to a person, then it's no longer protected health information. It's just data that you can do whatever you want with. And so HIPAA applies to covered entities that store PHI. You could store a PHI and not be a covered entity, in which case you're actually out of scope of HIPAA. Let's say that you've got a site that patients, maybe it's like a patient social media site, and they're sharing information with each other, but it has nothing to do with their actual health records. It's just them supplying information. Then you're exempt from HIPAA. But if you're doing both of these things, then you are covered by HIPAA. Maria, do you have a question?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, if your app or your website is not HIPAA compliant, right? Not that it's not compliant, but you don't have both of those features.
Correct. Yeah, so, and you're talking about WeHealth? Yeah, so because WeHealth, we don't actually pull any information from electronic health records, or really any health records at all. We do not have to comply with HIPAA. Now, we're pretty much compliant with HIPAA, but it's not something that we specifically get certified for. And that's because any information is provided specifically by the patients, and we actually don't even store it. If they're connected with a clinical trial, we don't store that connection. We don't store their answers to any screeners. We just use that to figure out what resources might be helpful for them and then connect them to those resources. Now, there are other clinical trial recruitment tools out there that might dive through health records and try to see who might qualify for a specific clinical trial based on the information in their health records. Anyone that does that absolutely falls under HIPAA, because they're basically, without permission, they're diving through protected health information that is supplied by a covered entity. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I have one more question. If you were making like a patient advocacy application where they just go in and kind of talk to each other, that necessarily also wouldn't need to be HIPAA compliant, right? Because the patients are not sharing their medical records, or just, it's kind of like a Facebook page for them.
Yeah, that is correct. But you might find, if you're building this, that the things that you want to do, maybe you want them to upload some of their health record information so that they can share it easily with their physician, similar to how My Health Story works. At that point, you would need to start looking at being HIPAA certified. And HIPAA certified, it is a security thing for sure, but there's also a little bit of branding to it. So being able to say that you're HIPAA certified might make your users more comfortable. And so that might be something that you would prioritize based on your interactions with users.
Thank you.
High tech, this is sort of the unofficial successor to HIPAA, and it's abbreviation for Health Information Technology for Economic and Clinical Health. This was passed along with the Affordable Care Act. And this defines business associates. And a business associate is someone who provides services to a covered entity that involves access to PHI, as well as entities that create, receive, maintain, or transmit PHI on behalf of another business associate. So an example here might be, let's talk about WeHealth again. If we were working with a specific clinical trial and we said, hey, we need a list of your currently enrolled patients so that we can figure out, what's working in your clinical trial and how we can improve recruitment, enrollment, retention, that sort of thing. That would then make us a business associate. So because even though we're not, accessing some of this electronic health information directly, if we are working with the PHI that is being used by a covered entity, HIPAA and the sort of protections provided by it extend to me as a business associate. And I actually have to enter into a business associate agreement that will prevent disclosure of any PHI.
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah. So I think what I'm kind of struggling with.
Okay. I'll keep going. So I have to enter into this BAA, which essentially is preventing the disclosure of any PHI, as well as requiring the implementation of security controls. So a lot of this, there's not like an official, I buy HIPAA, and then I'm good. It's more that I have to now get certified by someone that says I comply with all of the security needs that I need to comply with in order to be HIPAA certified. So it's kind of like, you're familiar with LEEDs, like the LEEDs green certification with buildings. You might see on certain, especially new buildings, that they'll be LEED certified, which essentially means that some inspector came in and said, yeah, you know what, this is an eco-friendly building. Maybe it's like waterless toilets, things like that. And HIPAA is very similar. So it's not a status that you buy. It's not like a official product or anything that you have. It's just some auditor has audited you for your security practices and verified that you are protected. So some of the requirements that auditor will look for is access control. So making sure that not only do you require a strong password for a user to get in, a lot of the times, and I think with HIPAA, it's now required that you have multi-factor authentication for any users that have access to that data. Not only do you have that, but you also have very few accounts that access everything. And if possible, no accounts that access everything. But instead, each person might have an account, maybe a doctor can only see their own patients, or a patient can only see, the information within their particular field, or their particular disease area. So not only having a strong access control, strong password and all of that, but also limiting, they call that the least privilege principle, where you only give someone the least amount of privileges that are required for them to do their job. So very few admins, in other words. Audit control. So you've always got that security camera on, and you're also always monitoring. Now, companies like Microsoft, Google, and Amazon actually make this a lot easier, because what they'll do is they'll monitor what's going on your web page for you, and then they can give you alerts when suspicious activity happens. So you essentially have the power of these trillion-dollar companies helping you detect threats. Integrity, this is also similar to auditing, but making sure that any time that data is changed, that you know who changed it, and you're able to, there's like a paper trail, so that you can confirm that if data is, especially if it's important for the health of a given patient, you know that no one has messed with it, right? Because you can imagine, especially if someone's about to go into surgery, and I don't know, someone has it out to get this person, and they say, oh, you know what, operate on their left leg, not their right leg. And then suddenly you have someone with now 2 bum legs instead of 1. So there's a high severity to people being able to get into your systems and change data when it has something to do with health. Restricting access to people who have not been authenticated. So you'd be surprised how even with health apps, sometimes there's backdoors that you can get through where you don't even need to log in. So making sure that that's not possible. And oftentimes, if you're trying to get something like HIPAA certification, you'll engage in what's called a penetration test, where you'll essentially hire a hacker to try to break into your system because they know how to find those backdoors. And frankly, a lot of those backdoors, they usually use JavaScript. So this is another reason why, as you become more sophisticated with your application, you want to move things onto the server, because these hackers, they can be very good at injecting code that is favorable to them into browser-facing JavaScript. And then finally, transmission security. So the key word here is, everyone always says, you need to have end-to-end encryption. So something that is encrypted, remember I showed you that image of the passwords here. This is an example of encryption, right? No one's using this password. That their password is saying something that means something to them, but maybe has some symbols in it. And then it's being encrypted into this long, impossible to parse alphanumeric symbolic list of characters. So when we say transmission security, we mean we want it to be encrypted at its source, and then also remain encrypted as it's being transmitted to someone who might need to analyze or perform algorithms on that data. So encryption, we mentioned. Another aspect with access control is having auto log off, so that someone can't just like sign on and leave it on some highly sensitive screen, and then maybe they get in a fight with their spouse, and then their spouse has all this information, and they end up selling it or leaking it or something like that. That happens shockingly often. When you hear about hacks, oftentimes it's not that they hacked the servers or things like that. It's just that someone was lazy with leaving something logged on when they shouldn't have. And there was no auto log off in place. So a lot of security measures that you put in are actually security measures that prevent lazy people from leaving protected information exposed. Firewalls, this is protection against those hackers that are trying to hack the servers, things like that. So blocking people who seem malicious. And people might seem malicious because maybe they're hitting a web page like hundreds of times a minute, right? So that they're a bot, not a person. Maybe they're coming from suspicious IP addresses like Tor or certain blocked IP addresses that are known to be affiliated with hackers. And then also data backups. So this is another thing that's very important. If you hear a lot about ransomware in the news, that basically means that someone has encrypted your data with their own encryption so that you can't now read your data. And they say, hey, I'll give you the de-encryption key, but you got to pay me like $20 million. And that's literally what it is. Like, they will charge millions and millions of dollars just for this encryption key. That might be 10 lines of code. That's it. So backing up, make sure that you're not dependent on that. So if they encrypt your data or they make it so that you can't use it anymore, they corrupt it maybe, at least you can go back to the backup. So if you know that you're faced with only losing like the last 6 hours of data, as opposed to all of your data ever, then you might be less willing to pay that ransomware attacker the money that they're asking for. Like I said, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, they supply great tools for encryption. So this isn't stuff that you have to figure out on your own. we're really in an age of web development where you just focus on the interesting stuff, the stuff that is relevant for your specific application, right? If you want to get medications delivered to people's homes by a drone, you can just focus on that part. And usually companies like Amazon will take care of the security for you. Now, it does become up to you to opt into the services that they offer. And a lot of people just sort of don't know what they don't know. So really understanding that these are the things you need. And if you don't know that you have them, you probably don't. And you need to turn those on the hosting services that you're using. Finally, a little bit about FDA regulation. So digital health applications are obviously very new in the world. And so there's not a lot of case study on how to regulate them. Recently, about 5 years ago, government passed the 21st Century Cures Act. And this was really one of the first pieces of legislation that gave some guidance as to how digital health applications should be regulated. And they created a couple categories of what is not subject to FDA oversight. And they said things that are like clinical decision support software, mobile apps, digital tools, all 4 of your prototypes fall under the not subject to FDA oversight. So there was a time before they passed this act where people were just wondering. They thought, well, if I develop an app like this, are they going to ask me to get like a medical device clearance? And if so, there's no way that this would be economically feasible. And so the FDA came out and said, no, actually, most of you are exempt. And so that really prompted a bit of a boon in the creation of these digital tools. Things that are still subject to FDA oversight include any sort of hardware, so wellness hardware, things that might be considered devices because they're actually physical implements that are being used to keep someone healthy, as well as software that manipulates health data. So software that does that, an example might be, let's say a tool that will take a heartbeat and make diagnoses with that heartbeat. So instead of just displaying that heartbeat in a easier way for the doctors to see, maybe it'll actually say, hey, this is atrial fibrillation, something like that. If you're making diagnoses with the software, or if you're transforming it in a way that the doctors are going to use this to make decisions, but the raw data is no longer really recognizable, that would be subject to FDA oversight. So this new regulation has really freed up the development of new digital health apps. So what's next? I mean, telemedicine, obviously this has been a huge one over the last year, as there's become a need to be able to see patients without actually seeing them due to COVID restrictions. And telemedicine is almost certainly here to stay. To what extent, we don't completely know, but it's something that people have been talking about for years, but red tape has been keeping telemedicine sort of on the back burner for a lot of medical care because, you know, a lot of questions about, well, who's liable, if it's going across state lines, whose jurisdiction does the telemedicine provider fall under? So all of that got figured out real quick during COVID. And so telemedicine really advanced by probably about 5 years due to COVID, and it's definitely here to stay. Blockchain for patient records. This is something that's really being talked about. Patient records are not portable. They're typically not owned by the patient. And it's very hard to transmit them across different sources. You could imagine, and a lot of companies are working on how to use blockchain in order to efficiently and effectively transmit a patient's patient record between different sources, whether they be different hospitals or researchers that can develop therapies for those patients. while protecting that patient's privacy. And even in some cases, paying that patient for use of their record. So a lot of interesting things going on there. I mean, I think of all the blockchain applications, other than I guess Bitcoin sort of as money, obviously that's had a huge impact on the world. But a lot of this other stuff is kind of noise. But I think using blockchains to effectively transmit patient data is a very innovative and very promising use of the technology. AI for population health, there's more data that's being intaken or that health systems are intaking than ever before by orders of magnitude, probably thousands of times more data than they've ever had before, and no one knows what to do with it. So this might be a great opportunity for AI to parse, what's important with a given population, what's driving poor as well as good health outcomes, and how can we use that to better treat populations of people. That also feeds into real world evidence. So there's a lot of talk now that we have all this data that's being taken in by health systems, can we move away from the randomized clinical trial methodology? And I don't think anything's ever going to really take the place of a randomized clinical trial in terms of how effectively you can say that something works. But if you've got all this real world evidence and it's being collected over time and maybe even continuously, you can start to figure out if a given therapy is causal just by looking at when that therapy was applied and then how that impacted the timeline of the patient's health. So there's a lot of opportunities there. And then, of course, digital health therapies. Some of the very first therapies were approved in the past, I would say 2 or 3 years. A lot of them are around mental health, diabetes. There's a digital health therapy that's been approved for diabetes. So there's a lot of potential there to potentially go beyond the pill and use digital health to improve patients' lives. So that's all I've got in terms of slides. So I'll stop sharing my screen, and I'd say that it was a pleasure teaching you all. I'm very impressed by the prototypes that you came up with in the end. And I look forward to figuring out how you all might end up using your newfound coding skills in your future careers. I think you're going to have to, whether you like it or not. And my hope is that this class has prepared you to be a little bit more fluent in that than you might have been without it. So thanks so much for your time. And I'll stick around for the next half an hour or so if you all have any questions that you want to ask me. Otherwise, you're free to go. Prepare for, I'm sure you all still have, are you all done with finals or do you still have some finals left? Okay, so I'm sure some of you are anxious to get back to studying.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you. Great
Thanks.
work.
Professor, have you ever thought about making this class a full semester?
It's not really up to me, but it's definitely something that last year's class requested as well. And the advantage is that if we did that, we'd be able to probably take a bit more time to understand Git more thoroughly, as well as teach a little bit of backend coding. So I think there's definitely advantages to doing that. But as of right now, I don't think there's space for it. And I don't even know if I'd have the time, but I'd like to. I think in the ideal world, this would definitely be a full semester course.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it was really fast with like the Code Academy, but then also the lectures and doing all that stuff, which I mean was fine. But I think in general, because I took, have you heard of Gene 312? It's a Python class programming for the biosciences with Professor Dodds.
Interesting.
It's a really interesting class. It's
Is it within KGI or is it just in the Claremont Consortium?
I think the Claremont Consortium.
Gotcha.
But yeah, Gene 312. We did like he's a really, really great professor. We did like programming specifically geared towards like I don't know, the biosciences and learn a lot more towards that. But that was all Python.
Oh, very cool.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's another reason why I stick with Python. I mean, I kind of have to because it's what I know. But it's also convenient because a lot of you I know have had to learn Python for statistics, data analysis type of applications. So it becomes a nice fit with, okay, well, now this is how you would take those skills you learn and actually put them on a web page. Because I know when I first learned how to do coding, it was more for data manipulation, and I was sort of clueless as to how that would show up on a website. And you know, for me, there was definitely an aha moment when I learned some of how that happens. So I think my goal with this class is to provide a little bit of that aha for you all.
Yeah, I think I mean, coding is one of those skills that if you don't use it, you're going to lose it. So it's just one of those things that you just got to keep on kicking yourself in the butt and trying to be able to learn more, take more lessons.
I think it definitely is with I would say one change that I would make to that, which is that once you're comfortable with it, I think you always remain comfortable and sort of swimming in that world. So it's like you might not, you know, the user to lose it definitely works with if you want to create applications on your own. But that familiarity, if you find yourself dealing with a problem, which you will find yourself dealing with many, many problems, and you see that one member of the problem solving team is using coding skills to try to solve it, you will hopefully no longer be intimidated by what they're doing. And then you might be the only other person in the team that is not just like, well, you know, that person is doing their thing and whatever they spit out, I'm going to trust and I hope it works, right? You can actually take a more critical eye to it as well as help that person out. So it's definitely helpful to be able to at least converse with the people who are doing the coding if you're not doing the coding yourself.
Yeah, that's similar to what Maria said. I think that's great. And it's good quality.
Yeah, and I think that doesn't go away. I mean, maybe if you weren't to touch it in like 20 years, eventually it would fade. But that comfort, that's sort of what you learn in school anyway, right? You're not going to remember 95% of what you learned in class and sort of
It's so sad.
the specifics that, but it's fun because the point is you learn how to learn. You learn how to, you'll never be intimidated by a scientific paper, right? Because you've probably read so many throughout your schooling. So you might forget all the specifics that you ever read in a scientific paper, but when COVID comes around, you know, hopefully that doesn't happen again. But being able to read the primary literature instead of whatever the New York Times writes is tremendously empowering. And so I think hopefully y'all are going to have that same feeling of empowerment with coding throughout the rest of your careers.
I also just one other little thing. So, I mean, after this project, I mean, Alana and I were just looking over at Maria's and Joanne's and all the other kind of projects, and we're like, wow, these things are amazing. What's like kind of like the next step? How would you make this thing an actual website?
So it is an actual website. You know, you've got the GitHub pages. So you're pretty much there. I think there's a setting within GitHub where you can buy a domain and then make that you know, whatever you want to make that. So it could be dispatch.com, although that's probably a tremendously expensive domain name. You could go dispatch.health or something that might be cheaper. And then associate that with the page. So this is a little bit into the weeds, but just a quick primer on domains. So a domain name is an association with an IP address. And you all already have an IP address. So your GitHub page has a specific IP address, and it's probably something like 50.12.15.5, something like that. That's what an IP address looks like. Now, nobody is going to go to 50.12.15.5 because who's going to remember that sort of thing? But if you buy a domain, you can now point it at that IP. So you can say, if someone goes to dispatch.com, assuming you own that domain, you say, take that over to 15.12.15.5. So now you own it and you have the ability to point it wherever you want to point it. And so at that point, then you would have the page that you made, but dispatch.com would go to that page.
That makes sense.
The only thing that GitHub Pages is missing is if you wanted to start to incorporate backend, I don't think GitHub Pages supports that. So what you would have to do is you'd have to buy a server. Now, the nice thing is that servers are free. AWS, Google, Microsoft. So it's Amazon AWS, Microsoft Azure, that's AZURE, or Google Cloud. There's also DigitalOcean is another one. So those are, I think, the four major players in the sort of cloud server space. And all of them allow you to use their servers for free. If you're just sort of like no, you don't have any visitors, or even if you just have like a dozen visitors a day, that's a drop in the bucket. They don't care. They want to enable you to do that because if you're just getting the 12, 20, whatever visitors a day, you're not actually taxing their systems at all. So their business model is, as you get thousands or even more users per day, they start to ratchet up the cost. But it becomes a win-win because it's sort of like a good problem to have. If you've got all those users, you're probably making money on some aspect of your business model. So you're more than happy to pay for those servers. So those four companies, you would just Google them, go to their homepage, and then they're more than happy to help you figure out how to set up a server with them because you're a customer at that point. And then they're also more than happy because, like I said, everyone knows GitHub. Literally, if you're a coder and you don't know GitHub, well, you're not a coder. Like every coder, 100% of coders know GitHub. And so if you sign up for one of these services, they will tell you step by step, and it's not even that many steps, how to link GitHub to the server that you've just bought.
Yeah.
And so then when you push a change onto GitHub, it will automatically then go on to their server. There's a lot of other services too. Heroku, Heroku, and I'll post this on YouTube if you want to review it. They do a lot of the management of the server. So they are also free at the beginning, but they end up being really expensive as you scale up. But it's necessary. They're basically, they replace having like a backend server. They call them DevOps engineer. So if you don't know how to do that or don't want to deal with it, then you use a service like Heroku. And then it's just sort of clicking buttons like, oh, I want to ratchet my security up on this, or I want to now use 5 servers instead of 4 because I've got a bump in traffic. You just like click the plus button to add more servers and they do all the work for you. So it's all, I mean, we live in an amazing time for web development. It used to be that if you were starting Google or something, you were like some super genius on both software and hardware. And you had like a bunch of servers in your garage and like there'd be a mini fire and you'd have to like put it out and then resolder connections and all that stuff. You don't have to do that anymore. Everything's just run through software. And they're backed by these huge companies. So that's great from a lowering the barrier to entry on creating one of these websites. Say what you want about like, okay, well now you're beholden to these behemoth companies. That might have its own issues, but no one seems to have an issue with it at this point, at least. And it's nice that there's competition. So it's like, you're not just dependent on Google. If you realize that now Google's evil, you can go to Amazon. Until you realize they're evil, you go to Microsoft. And then, if they're all evil, then a new startup will be happy to take you.
Sounds great.
To Justin's question, can you touch upon like how you developed your WeHealth application and like who you got incorporated into building it out?
Sure. So it started off while I was working as a manager at Baxter Healthcare, and I basically ran the U.S. production and distribution of a few of their plasma therapies. So essentially, they would take, I never know what to call it because I want to say plasma donations, but they're not donations because Baxter would pay them. So whatever you want to call that, plasma from people. And we would purify the good components of that plasma. So the antibodies from those people. In fact, you might have heard in the news over the past year of convalescent plasma. That's basically what I made when I worked for that company. And obviously we didn't do it for COVID because COVID wasn't a thing back then. But we would actually do it as an example with botulism, because there's a problem called infant botulism where you would, babies would end up with botulism and they would die. And so we would take plasma from people who worked at Allergan, which makes Botox, which is a form of botulism toxin. And they were all vaccinated against botulism toxin. So we would take their antibodies and then give it to those babies as an example. So that was like the version of convalescent plasma that we made back then. But anyway, we worked with a lot of rare disease, and I noticed that a lot of rare disease patients were using our products off label, and Baxter had no desire to approve it officially for those patients. And the reason was, well, they were using off label anyway. And this is where I found out that recruiting patients for these clinical trials, especially if it's a rare disease clinical trial, is very difficult. And in fact, almost half of the trials fail for reasons that have nothing to do with whether they work or not, but because they just can't find the patients. And so that prompted me to start WeHealth to try to see if we could find a better way to recruit patients for these clinical trials, and doing it not by trying to recruit from medical facilities, which is the current method, but instead try to recruit through the networks of the patients themselves. So empowering the patients to become the drivers of that health outreach. And so I contracted with some developers to build the platform, and they were actually great. And for the price, they weren't bad either. But as they were starting to create the product, and I wanted to make like little changes here or there, then it would always come with a bill, and then it would usually take like a week for what I thought were just little tiny changes. And so I just started to learn how to make the changes myself, and then that snowballed into doing a bulk of the coding myself. So that's how I learned. I'd learned some coding in college, but it was like MATLAB. I don't know if you all have ever used MATLAB, but it's not really, doesn't really have any real world applicability outside of like data analysis. But it sort of speaks to what I said a second ago of you're able to not be intimidated by it. And I think that's what I gained from that. And so that enabled me to jump into the code that these developers had made for me, and then sort of make it my own. And that's sort of always been my thing. I like to copy things. Like I just, I find that I'm good at it. I'm not really good at starting with a blank slate, but if I've got something, I'm pretty good at turning that into something that works for my purposes. So sort of different learning styles, and this was one that worked for me. Other people might be a lot better at just learning the fundamentals and going from there. Any other questions?
I just wanted to clarify, since Justin and I are having so much trouble with getting Git to work, is sending you the code sufficient? Or because I tried doing what you emailed us, but it's not uploading properly. It says it's uploaded like since last week, not this week.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not quite sure. please.
Let me ask you on GitHub, because I know that you had it on master, right?
Yes,
And you can't get it onto main.
I tried, like your email said, I tried switching it so to the master file,
Mm-hmm.
but even when I do that, it only updates from, it says the last update was 7 days ago, which is more recent than what it was before, but that's still not accurate.
What if you go to main? Okay, so now this is, so now master is the more updated one.
Mm-hmm.
And so 7 days ago is not accurate, and you can't get that to be more recent.
Yeah, it's not.
What if you tried just putting that onto Justin's GitHub? Because it seems like by having these different branches, you've had a little bit of a problem. I mean, you could send me the code. It just might be because it's gonna be a bunch of different files.
Mm-hmm.
How many different files is it?
A lot.
Yeah, so that might just be a
We
little
also have all the
harder.
sources too.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't mind navigating through the different code files. It just might be hard to organize that in the way that you need it to be organized, just through an email.
Okay, so we can.
You could try to upload it onto a Google Drive. That might work, because you
Mhm.
can like upload a folder onto a Google Drive and then just share that with me.
Okay.
Yeah, that might be my recommendation is just whatever your master folder is, upload that onto a Google Drive, and then it should maintain the same structure of what you had for your code base.
Okay. Okay, sounds good. Okay, thank you.
I just want to point out that JavaScript might not send through via Gmail because it thinks, or like Google, it's going to think it's a virus, I think.
Oh,
Or that's
really?
what happened with me and Scott. Yeah.
Fabulous. Okay.
That's a good point.
Like as a file, but like maybe just copy and paste or like, yeah. I don't know. I think he just took a screenshot and I typed it in. Yeah, never mind.
Or
Okay.
we copy paste all the code into an email. Then we just email you a bunch of.
I won't know how to read that.
Yeah.
Very tough.
Are you like, Alana, do you have it all on your local?
Yes.
I don't know if it's like too much trouble for you, but then like what I did one time, because like we weren't able to push ours through GitHub, I just like copied and paste each of them onto GitHub directly.
Okay. All right. I might just do that then.
You could try using mine. You could try that.
How many files is it?
It is. I deleted a couple, but 3, 4, 5. There's 6 HTML files, and then the corresponding source files or CSS files.
Yeah, so what Joanna's recommending might actually not be that hard. You just sort of click into family, select all, replace, and then.
Yeah. Okay, I'll probably.
Another suggestion. Sorry. I was wondering like if you're able to like just clone Justin's like blank one and then like transfer those files into Justin's and then push it. Will it work?
That would work. So when you clone into a specific directory, it associates that clone with whatever the repository is that it's cloning from. And so if you just sort of replace those files, then you should be able to git commit and then git push onto the repository.
Okay. Okay, sounds good.
Either one would work. I know with all the trouble that you're having with Git though, like just editing the files on GitHub might be the least frustrating. If a little bit tedious, but at least you know it'll work.
Yeah. Okay, I'll play around with it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Professor. Thanks for a great semester.
Absolutely. Thanks. I really enjoyed working with you all.
Professor.
Yes.
Oh, go ahead, Marie.
Oh no, I was gonna say, Professor, I'll just follow up with you on the email that I sent you.
Okay, great. If you want, I mean, I've got time if you want to chat right now.
Okay, yeah, I can just wait then. Yeah.
Yeah, and actually both of you expressed similar interests in sort of wanting to learn a little bit more about coding and what opportunities are out there. So
Yeah, I don't mind, John, if you want to have like a separate call with Professor, I can come back or I can email. I don't mind like doing a
It's
group.
okay. I don't mind either. Go ahead.
You can ask your question. Go ahead.
You know, I was kind of just curious because I'm not applying to med school until like maybe next cycle, so next year. So then I have like kind of like 2 years, and I'm not sure like what to do. Like I kind of want to play with this, but then maybe I should learn more before like I find a job maybe doing this.
yeah. I would definitely, I can try to send some more materials. I mean, you'll have the lecture, and that's a place to start with next steps for sure. And then, I mean, my biggest advice is the best way to learn is to keep going on your projects. You know, I know specifically you two, your projects they're yours, right? I mean, they were your ideas as wireframes, and they were taken to fruition as prototypes. And so, I mean, it's the type of thing that you could definitely, because it's a passion project of yours, continue to work on. And you know, Joanne, I know that you've got a certain advantage in the work that you do in the ER, where you can essentially have a website that you might like, you know, during slow times, share with someone that you're next to, and be like, hey, does this work? Does this help? Right? And you just sort of start playing with it, and then eventually in doing that, you're going to zero in on a real use case. I think what you did was like a great demonstration of how you can use code to get stuff done. But like, if you want to actually use this in the real world, you're probably going to zero in on like one thing that's going to be super valuable to your colleagues. And so once you've done that, then you've actually got a business. And that could be really cool. All right, there might just be a logistical thing that doesn't even involve patient information, but it's maybe something that's helpful at like the check-in desk. Like you mentioned, the translation thing, maybe just focus on that. And then that might be a product that your hospital adopts. And once that happens, I mean, you're going to get funding easy for it. So that'd be my advice. It's just, if you want to continue to learn coding, continue to work on your product and continue to publish on GitHub. I mean, like I said, the people who are sort of in that world, they really respect what you publish on the GitHub, and they would use that to sort of be able to judge your abilities in that area, and know that you're not just all talk, you know. Does that answer your question fully, or is there anything I missed?
Sorry, I had a question and then my mind blanked out. I will get back to you.
Okay, great.
I think I can kind of share my passion behind Medrone, and then because I like being at KGI, I've always, or even before coming to KGI, I've always been heavily involved in like the digital world, and I've always wanted to merge it with the health industry, but I didn't know how to, or I still don't know how to, but it's something that I'm really passionate about. But okay, but let me backtrack. But so I was doing KOL interviews for Genentech because they were trying to look into improving the digitization of the supply chain. And so I talked to a vice president individual from Merck, and they told me that they have this vaccine Gardasil, but it's a 3-shot dose. And a lot of patients don't follow up with their second or third dose just because they have to go into the hospital like 1 month or 3 months afterwards. And so patient compliance is decreasing. And so essentially what they thought of, or innovatively, like what they're thinking about doing is sending the vaccine to a patient's home. So if I need to get my second or third dose, I'll just order it on my phone, and I'll tell Merck directly that I need it, and then they'll ship out the vaccine in like a temperature controlled box using like UPS or using FedEx, and then a nurse will come to my home, give me the vaccine, administer it, and then that temperature controlled box, they'll just send a notification to FedEx to pick it up. So now it's recyclable, but it incorporates all these different components like supply chain, the company, cutting out like the middle person. And so I think that that was kind of like my inspiration for Medrone, because I think a lot of people do need medications. And it doesn't necessarily have to apply to people who live in like rural areas, but even people like in low income communities who can't always go to the pharmacy to pick up the medication because they're working, you know, or all these like different obstacles, or people with accessibility problems. But yeah, so that's the story behind that. But I don't, like, I would want to continue the concept of Medrone, but how did you, like, my question would be how did you get the funding, or how did you, from your prototype, who did you talk to kind of like get the wheel going?
Yeah, it's not easy to sort of start from nowhere and try to build it into something. But what I will say is that people tend to be pretty accessible, or at least 10% of people tend to be pretty accessible. So it's sort of barraging people with emails and then just seeing who bites, right? So there might be certain, with drone delivery, I don't know how much literature there is out there, but if there is, email all those authors. And the lead author is always, their contact information is on the paper. The others you can always find. So just do some sleuthing, figure out their emails and send them all emails and talk about how much you enjoyed their paper, blah, blah, blah. And then ask them some questions, or ask if you can take 15 minutes to chat over the phone. It works with a pretty high frequency. Even articles, right? There might be some people who have published articles, maybe not even for the really well-known periodicals, but just sort of like a medexpress.com, something like that. And then if you read this article, figure out who wrote it, and then figure out how to contact that person. Almost all articles that are published online, they're attached somehow to contacting that person, you know, either through like a form submission or list their email directly. So get those people on your side first and foremost. You don't want to be developing this in isolation, even if you are the only person who's like really working on it. As long as you have these people that have given you input, I think that's the most important thing, so that you're not coming up with all the ideas yourself, but instead you're addressing the problems that they have specifically told you that they have. I would say that's the best place to start. And then through that, you'll get led to the right channels for funding or for people to partner with, all of that, because these are the people who are going to know who you need to talk to. And they're going to be your first customers. So that's first, is figure out that you've got customers, you know?
Yeah.
I would also say that a lot of these companies like Merck, they have relatively new divisions that they've built up called like digital health and innovation. Sometimes it's embedded within their marketing. So sometimes it's their centralized marketing. Sometimes it's a specific department called digital innovation. Sometimes it's within each product's marketing. So generally, like a Gardasil has its own marketing team. So figuring out which is the case for a given company, although you don't really need to know. But just so you know, it's the marketing department that comes up with tools like that. So it might be that you start Medrone on your own, or it might be that you really impress Merck with what you've built with Medrone, and maybe they don't buy the company because it's not maybe established enough to be something worth buying, but maybe it gets you a good job because suddenly your resume looks a heck of a lot better than the average person applying, because you can say, hey, here's my GitHub account of this thing that I created that could, I mean, maybe even brand it for Gardasil, you know, and say like, here's something that I built, I know how to code. And while I might not be the person to build this directly, like I want to be that person within your company who can get that product built for you. that sort of thing. It colors your resume in a way that most of your fellow applicants would not be coloring their resume.
But where do you put that, like in your skills or like interests, or do you put it like in your experience? Like,
I would put that in the skills and then a link to your GitHub.
okay,
Right.
yeah. I've been realizing a lot of companies do now have like these digital innovation
Mhm.
departments, and it's something that they're all kind of looking into.
Yeah. So they'll click that. So, I mean, obviously you want to make sure it's polished enough to be comfortable sharing that. But I mean, your site looks really nice. And I think it wouldn't take that much more work to make that something that you should feel comfortable sharing with a Merc.
Okay, but I have to do what you told Justin, right? Like, make it into an IP, or like use the IP and then make a link for that specific
No,
link.
because you could just give them the emangulo.github.io
Okay,
because that works.
yeah,
I mean, if you wanted to make it
medrone.com.
I think it's better as the GitHub link though, because that shows that it's your project.
Mhm.
If it's just a link, like how do they know that was you? I guess it'd have your like picture on it and all of that, but they might want to see the code. And I mean, you're not at a point where you need to feel like you need to protect that code, So it's something that you should be able to feel comfortable sharing with a company like Merck or whoever you want to employ you. I'm trying to think if there's anything else along those lines. I mean, obviously, if they ask for a cover letter, this could be a big part of that as well. So that you don't have to take up all of your cover letter saying about how much of a team player you are, or you're conscientious, or your biggest fault is that you're a perfectionist, that sort of thing. You can actually say something real that they can look into and explore, and that'll really make you stick out.
Joanne, did you remember your question?
No, I guess initially I wanted the platform to be for everyone to use, right? The patient, the front desk, health professionals, and then I ended up focusing on like the patient's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So then like, I don't know how else to go more deep into it, because you want me to focus on like what, like just like one thing instead of like all my tabs kind of thing. Yeah.
So, I mean, some of it might just be making it look like cleaning it up a little bit and building some of those features out. One thing that's extremely important, if you're doing this for people in the hospital, it's not as important. But if it's patient facing, it needs to look slick. Because if it doesn't, then people aren't going to feel comfortable submitting their information into your platform. So looking slick is the most important thing if you want to get user adoption. The one thing I'll caution you with though is that getting patients to adopt is going to be very difficult. People put billions of dollars into applications that patients don't end up using because they haven't been able to crack that code. How do you get the patient to step away from Instagram for a second and then use your app? So I think there's a saying in tech, which is build painkillers, not vitamins. So if someone's life is going okay, and even if it's not, but in their own mind it is, they're not going to be as willing to adopt something. But if they've got a real pain that you can solve for them, and I'm generally not talking about a health pain because people are perfectly happy to ignore their health pain for whatever reason. But like some sort of pain in like cutting paperwork out or making billing more transparent, something like that, then they'll use it. Or if it's something that's fun to use in some way, then they'll definitely use it too. But in the workplace, there's a lot of pain. There's pain everywhere. And so that's why there's more low-hanging fruit there. You know what I mean? So I don't want to discourage making it an application for patients. And I think that there's a lot that could be done there for sure. But just understand that it's a much more difficult market to penetrate. And especially if you want to build a business model around it. It's pretty easy to get a hospital to pay you like 20 grand for something that you can say is going to make the lives of their nursing staff easier. It might save them X amount of time. You can sort of like embed it into their profit and loss line. You can say like, oh, maybe you don't have to have your nurses working as much overtime with this application. So it's a lot easier to justify a high payment, but a patient, I mean, especially nowadays, you can't get people to pay more than $1. People complain if they have to like pay $2 for like a new photo app or something. It's like people have this expectation of free. So it becomes a lot more difficult to create a business model around it.
So are you saying to like create my own like emergency health or no, what is electronic health system?
No, but just, I mean, working in the emergency room, I'm sure you see all kinds of problems, things that could be done easier. And it doesn't necessarily mean transformation of the health record. It could be something that has nothing to do with health, but it has something to do with how healthcare workers complete their day. Translation is a big one you mentioned. It has nothing to do with health, but it's a big problem in the ER. So can you build something to help with that? That sort of thing. No, I don't want to discourage the app as is. I think the app that you built is really cool and definitely worth pursuing. It's just going to be a more difficult climb if you try to build it patient facing, if you have the choice.
Maybe I'll just work on it and then like keep it for like if I ever win the lottery for my own clinic. Yeah, I'll let you know.
And it could be something that, both of your apps have application as things that you don't need the patient to adopt specifically, right? Maria's, it might only be patients who are doing the Gardasil. And it might be that when they're in that first doctor's appointment, where they're about to start getting their prescription for Gardasil, they will, the doctor will give them a download to the app. And maybe Merck's paying for it. And the patient now automatically gets notifications of, hey, it's time for second dose. Where do you want your source to come from, or how do you want it to be delivered? Whatever. So at that point, it's sort of just what the patient needs in order to get the job done with their dosing regimen. And her actual customer is actually the pharma company. And they're the ones that are paying, the patient's not paying. So yours might be similar, where your actual customer is actually the clinic, but the patient still needs to be a user. So it's got to be really slick and frictionless for them. That's important too.
I guess my last question, Professor, so let's say I don't want to necessarily start working on my prototype development now. What kind of maybe like job positions should I be looking for or like job titles do you know that I should be looking for in terms of like digital innovation, stuff like that? Because it's kind of hard, obviously, like graduating just out of KGI. I think a lot of the positions are entry level, and especially going into the digital IT world, like you said, they're marketing, right? So you generally need like marketing experience about like the product or learning about like supply chain.
Yeah, I think out of KGI, you should be able to get an entry-level marketing job, like marketing associate, marketing manager. And I think including your GitHub as part of your resume could be a big boost that would set you apart from others. So I would say I would look at either of those marketing jobs. If the specific job says something about digital innovation, then you're golden. But even if not, I think that just trying to look within marketing and then try to play up your interests and your experience in digital health could be very valuable to make you an attractive candidate. You could also look at some local companies that are a little bit more digitally oriented. I think there's a company called What's it called? I think it's called Good RX.
Mm-hmm.
They're
The
in
ones
Los
who do, like,
Angeles. They're in Santa Monica. And they've been making a lot of news because I think they raised a bunch of money in the last week. So that's money that they're going to spend on headcount. So they're probably looking to hire. So sort of two routes, right? Your traditional companies, whether they be pharma or hospitals, and then trying to go within their marketing area because so much of marketing now is going digital. So probably could be any marketing role and you just play up your digital bona fides, or a smaller digital first company like GoodRx that's local or wherever you want to live, you know?
Yeah. No, I've heard of GoodRx, but yeah.
Yeah, I'd knock down their door because let me see what the news was. It was like literally a week ago. Oh, I think they just reported their earnings and it was like a lot. Like it surprised a lot of people how much money they were making. So I'm sure they've got a lot of money to spend on new hires.
We'll see. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Professor. If I have any additional questions, can I reach out to you like on LinkedIn or on your?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, you can send me an email. I think my KGI email stays turned on in the off time. So that works. Or my other email is will@wehealth.io.
Okay.
And actually my KGI emails, I don't use my KGI email. They just get forwarded to my WeHealth email.